Do-hyuk and the gnome are about to face each other until suddenly they are interrupted by someone telling them to stop. A young woman holding a sword steps in and tells Do-hyuk that she will take care of the gnome. She jumps forward and prepares her sword for a downward strike. The gnome calls out his minions to assemble, and a group of gnomes appears. Their crossbows are all loaded and pointed at her while she is still in mid-air. As they fire, the woman sees her life flash before her eyes. She begins to imagine the death that awaits her until suddenly, she sees arrows are being repelled away from her. Do-hyuk had activated armor on her body just in time. The woman lands safely on the ground and looks at Do-hyuk, wondering if he had casted the spell. Do-hyuk shouts at her to not get distracted and to look out because she is about to be attacked. She sees the gnome in front of her and barely manages to block its attack. Do-hyuk notices she is struggling and quickly uses magic missile to kill the gnome. He tells her that she should step aside because it is dangerous. However, the woman refuses and tells him that she should fight with him because she is also an awakened. Do-hyuk tells her that she might change her mind when she sees the giant armored sentinel that just appeared. The giant armored sentinel begins charging towards them while producing a high-pitched sound. The young woman notices that something feels wrong and wonders what just happened. Do-hyuk tells her that the giant armor sentinel activated submission and explains that it is a skill used by top-tier monsters to cause paralysis. She asks Do-hyuk how he wasn't affected. He tells her that he has been attacked with this skill before but doesn't explain further. He picks her up and begins carrying her to a place where it is safe. He explains to her that, although the armor spell he activated on her earlier had protected her from immediate harm, her body still experienced the force of the impact from the arrows. He then tells her to rest for a while, and she thanks him. He sees her rapier on the ground and wants to borrow it. She replies, "Sure," and tells him that that sword isn't exactly the best weapon. Do-hyuk uses his appraisal skill on the sword and sees that it is a normal weapon that increases muscular strength by 10. He says that it will do. Do-hyuk leaves and makes his way back to the outbreak site. As soon as he arrives, he quickly assesses the current situation and identifies 10 hammer gnomes, 9 archer gnomes, and the giant armor sentinel as the gnome leader. He thinks that defeating the gnome leader is going to be a challenge because of all the armor, and he believes the gnome leader's shield is not just an ordinary shield. He decides to first deal with the lesser gnomes. He activates magic missiles and quickly takes out a group of gnomes. He grins when he noticed how his magic missiles are stronger compared to DNF. He begins his move toward his next target and activates the fear skill. The gnomes see Do-hyuk surrounded with an ominous aura, and their gaze is met by a flash of light. A dragon suddenly appears and begins to attack. Fearing for his life, the gnome immediately fires his crossbow and kills the dragon. However, the dragon was not actually a dragon, instead, it was another gnome. The fear spell is a skill that causes hallucinations in its targets, and it is based on the caster's wisdom level. Do-hyuk becomes impressed by the effectiveness of this spell, as he watches the gnomes try to slaughter each other. He is glad that he has his replicated fountain pen artifact with him. Do-hyuk begins to turn his attention to the gnome leader. He wants to eliminate him quickly before the effects of the fear spell on the other gnomes were off. He starts his assault with magic missile, however, the gnome leader blocks the attack with its shield. Do-hyuk realizes the shield has magic resistance and decides to use another method to attack. He begins activating enchanted weapon on the rapier sword he borrowed. The once normal sword has upgraded to a rare grade weapon. It increases muscular strength by 35 and deals at least 500% more critical damage to the opponent. With the new sword in his hand, Do-hyuk prepares himself to jump and then launches forward, straight toward the enemy. The gnome leader quickly raises his shield, as he sees where Do-hyuk is aiming to strike. However, in the blink of an eye, the sword was able to penetrate through the shield and straight through the helmet. Do-hyuk sees that he defeated the gnome leader as it begins to lose the strength to stand. He smirks, and comments on how the gnome leader relied too much on the shield. Suddenly, the armor begins to move. The gnome leader appears to have survived the strike through the helmet. The mask on the helmet becomes loose and then falls to the ground. Do Hyuk's eyes widen when he sees that the helmet is empty. Confounded by the empty armor, Do Hyuk approaches the gnome leader with caution. The gnome leader prepares to make the first move and strikes down at Do Hyuk with its hammer. Do Hyuk reacts quickly and jumps to dodge, and counterattacks with Magic Missile. This time, Magic Missile was able to deal some damage. Parts of the armor begin to fall off and the real gnome leader is revealed. It all started to make sense to Do Hyuk. He becomes optimistic when he sees that the shield's magic resistance is broken. His spells will now be effective against the gnome leader. He looks at the other gnomes and realizes that the effects of the fear spell will soon wear off. With a sense of urgency, he begins a full-on assault on the gnome leader and attacks with Magic Missile. He activates the spell continuously while encircling his target, as the gnome leader struggles to block the barrage of magic missiles. Thinking that it is time, Do Hyuk jumps high to launch one final attack. A shower of magic missiles falls onto the gnome leader from directly above. The gnome leader is killed instantly as multiple projectiles plow through his body. All that is left to deal with are the 3 gnomes that were afflicted by the fear spell. Do Hyuk notices the gnomes are currently incapacitated as they are experiencing the aftereffects of the spell. Regarding them as easy prey, he quickly finishes them off. Do Hyuk is sitting on a bench, deep in thought, realizing that he only had to face one enemy with a magic-resistant shield this time. There is no way for him to know what he will encounter in the next battle. He understands that he needs to advance himself quickly and acquire Class 2 spells. A woman approaches Do Hyuk and he recognizes it is Yunso, the KMAA agent. Looking around at the scene, Yunso asks Do Hyuk if he really took care of all the monsters on his own. He answers her yes. She asks him about the other awakened individual, Ina Kim, who was at the site. Do Hyuk explains to Yunso that Ina Kim was injured at the start of the battle, so he moved her out of harm's way. He then asks Yunso about his compensation for handling this outbreak. It is commonly known that when an awakened individual steps in to resolve an unexpected outbreak, they are entitled to the spoils of the battle. She tells him that he does not need to worry. She says the corpses of 19 gnomes and a gnome leader, along with their dimensional stones and any salvageable weapons should fetch around 500 million won, about $380,000. Now that has been settled, Do Hyuk wants to get up and leave quickly. Yunso tells him to wait and asks where he is going and if he does not want to be interviewed for the evening news about his exploits. He declines and tells her that he does not like being in the spotlight, hoping that the KMAA can take care of things from here. She understands and commends him for a job well done. Do Hyuk thanks her and asks her to please return the rapier he had borrowed back to its owner. Do Hyuk had left just in time before the news reporters arrived at the scene. They begin asking Yunso several questions about Do Hyuk, wanting to know everything about him, from how he defeated the monsters to what he looks like. Later that day, somewhere in the city, a man calls out to the master while entering a room, where a young woman is sitting on a sofa holding a glass of wine. The young woman is annoyed because he didn't knock before entering her office. He apologizes and tells her that he will try again. She says it's fine and asks him what the problem is. The man proceeds and informs her that an outbreak had occurred near the New Humanity Street. The man's name is Chunhua Zhang, and he is the deputy guild master of the Plum Blossom Guild. He tells her that there were 0 deaths, just 1 injury. He goes on saying that 2 F-rank awakened individuals were at the site, and that one of them was a swordsman. The young woman interrupts him and tells him to stop beating around the bush and to get to the point. Chunhua Zhang begins to explain that an F-rank rookie used a sword and magic to quickly wipe out a pack of E-rank gnomes. He says that the rookie used some kind of spells against the monsters. The young woman asks to confirm if he had just said spells and was not referring to magic. He answers her yes and clarifies to her that it's the kind that uses finger motions and a chanted phrase. She mentions that she has only heard about it in theory and asks if this type of awakened class exists. The deputy guild master agrees and says that it is the first time that an awakened used such textbook spells, instead of a general skill. Thinking that someone, who had used spells to subdue a pack of gnomes and to create magic force fields, the young woman believes that this F-rank awakened is an individual with diverse talents. She says that they must recruit him immediately before the other guilds take him. The young woman's name is Lizzie and she is the guild master of the Plum Blossom Guild.